So you're a podcast or a editor or a producer or video editor or producer, and you've just spent hours on an episode or a project, and you cleaned up the audio, removed the filler words, added the music and the B-roll, improved the pacing. Everything is solid. You send it off, and then radio silence. Client ghosts you. But the project, well, it's live. It's out there. They're using your work, and you haven't been paid. Is there something you can do to stop them? Do you own this edit? Can you issue a DMCA takedown? Well, let's talk about what the law actually says. Hello, friends. It's Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this is Legit Podcast Pro, the show that helps creators, podcasters, and content entrepreneurs like you handle the legal and business stuff so you can focus on what you really do best. And today, we're talking about the legal rights of the post-production folks, the editors, the engineers, those post-production producers. And if you've ever wondered, well, do I own the work that I create, or can I refuse to deliver or revoke usage rights if I haven't been paid? Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to look at what the law says about this, what the rights of editors really are, and how to protect yourself and get paid fairly. So let's dive in and look at who owns what by default. Well, under U.S. copyright law, the creator, the author of a work, generally owns the copyright. That means that if you produce something original, like an audio mix, a sound design, a custom musical score, or maybe a full cut of a video, well, you might own it. Now, there are exceptions. If it's a work made for hire, the client owns it. If there's a contract that assigns the rights to someone else, then that someone else may own it. But if there's no contract, and if you're not an employee and you created something that is original, that meets the standard for the threshold for protection, well, then there's a good chance that you own it or some part of it. So what does this really mean? Well, to break it down, there are really only two situations where the client automatically owns your work. One is you're an employee and the work was created within the course and scope of your employment. And two is where you've signed a written contract, an agreement stating that it's a, quote, work made for hire, close quote. That's magic words. And it falls into one of 9 specific categories of works under the law that's allowed for. Podcast editing, well, if it's video, then it probably falls into the category of audio-visual or motion picture. But if it's audio only, well, that doesn't precisely fit into any one of those 9 categories. Isn't this copyright law stuff fun? So this is what happens when older laws have to be applied to more modern scenarios. So unless you're a W-2 employee or signed a contract with that work made for hire language, your work could still be yours. So what about the fact that it's the kind of editing, right? Is that even copyrightable? Well, there's a nuance here because not everything you do is going to be protected by copyright. Routine tasks like removing ums and ahs or leveling the volume, syncing up tracks, noise reduction, these are probably not going to be considered creative expression that rises to the level of copyrightability. But what if you reconstruct the interview to tell a better story, or add transitions and music cues that change the tone, or choose pacing and rhythm and flow deliberately to tell a better story? Now we may be talking about that kind of original authorship, and that is copyrightable subject matter. Selecting and editing B-roll? Well, maybe. It sort of depends on how original your choices that you're making are. And let's not even get started on who owns the B-roll footage itself and that kind of thing. So the bottom line is this: the more creative your role, the more likely you own some rights. So let's talk about those roles, because titles like editor or engineer can have blurry meanings when it comes to what they actually mean for copyright purposes. But legally, what matters is your contribution. If you are deciding how the story unfolds, or crafting the soundscape or the visual design, making artistic choices, well, then you're functioning more like a creator, a producer, and you may actually own copyright in the things that you contribute. If you're just cleaning things up technically without any creative choices, that's more of a technical service like engineering, not usually protected. So here's the game changer. The contract is everything. It's what controls the outcome of these kinds of questions. A strong agreement should clearly specify who owns that final product, whether payment is required before delivery, or whether usage is allowed if payment hasn't been made, and what happens if something goes wrong. One common clause that I try to include in my clients' templates is that the contractor retains all rights in and to the work until the payment is received in full. It's simple, it's clear, it's enforceable. And then there's the transfer or the assignment of rights, and that should also be in a written document. Unfortunately, that's a short document, less than a page, and it can be attached to a main agreement. But what's important is that we aren't leaving this stuff up to chance. Getting it in writing counts. So now let's say you did a job and you haven't been paid. If you don't have a written contract and your work was creative enough to be copyrightable, well, you might still own it. But that doesn't mean you should immediately go out and file a takedown or lock out access to the material. And that really brings us to the things you shouldn't do. Don't send a takedown notice unless you're absolutely sure you own the copyright and have the rights in question. Don't delete the files or block access after you've delivered the materials, and don't threaten to publicly shame your client. It'll hurt you more than help, and it could get you sued. Well, why? Because, hey, if you're wrong or even just legally unclear, you could be liable for damages under the DMCA or defamation law or worse. So tread carefully and be professional about it. What should you do? Well, here's the thing. First, try contacting the client informally and just document the correspondence. Remind them of the terms of the deal, clarify that you still own the work if you haven't been paid, and suggest a deadline for payment. Then, if there's no response, consider taking them to small claims court or arbitration. Or if it's a copyright issue, hey, consult a lawyer like me before you issue that takedown notice. And going forward, having a contract in place every time is the best you can do. It's not just about getting paid, it's about avoiding this kind of drama entirely. So listen, your work deserves protection. If you're an editor, a producer, an engineer, if you're doing this stuff professionally, you are contributing to the final product. And your work matters. It has value. It can even be protected. But unless you claim that protection right from the start and in writing, you might not have a leg to stand on. So know your rights and stop working without the protection of clear written contracts. Now, I just want to take another second just to say, don't be afraid of this work made for hire language. If you are being paid appropriately, it is perfectly fine that your client owns the results of your work efforts. The important thing is structuring things so you get paid. And that can be done in a number of ways, including indicating when payment is due and what happens if the payment doesn't happen, like they're not allowed to use the material until you've been paid in full. And then that gives you some contractual rights. The important thing is that the intentions of the parties is clear. Most editors I know, they don't really have an interest in owning the copyrights in the stuff they edit. They're concerned about getting paid and letting the clients own the stuff. So there you go. All right. So if you want to make sure, though, that your own rights are protected and that you get paid, I have just the thing you need over at our Easy Legal Template Agreements site, podcastlawforms.com. There you'll find everything you need to set clear terms and protect your contributions, whether you're an editor, an independent contractor, a producer, a writer, it's all there. So thanks for listening and for watching. I'm Gordon, and I will see you next time on Legit Podcast Pro.